Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be joining the Earth Day 2022 virtual stage with Earth Day Initiative and March for Science NYC. I'm Thimali Kodikara, and here with me is... I'll do it again. I thought maybe you'd jump in, Mary, but I'll say it again. I'll do it again. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Thimali Kodikara. I'm a co-host of a podcast called Mothers of Invention. I'm here with my other co-host, one of my two co-hosts, Mary Robinson, who was the former president of Ireland and is currently the chair of the Elders. And we are extremely happy to be joining the Earth Day 2022 virtual stage with Earth Day Initiative and March of Science NYC. And we're just getting together for the first time, Mary, since we saw each other in Scotland, not quite at COP26. You're a very busy bee the entire time. I was just saying, I've seen glimpses of you on the telly every once in a while, but otherwise you're just dashing about problem solving the planet. How did that go for you?
Well, it's good to see you again, Thimali, and I have great memories of our fun together on Mothers of Invention, but it's also great to have an Earth Day to refocus us because, frankly, we've been inevitably very concerned about what has happened in Ukraine, how it has unfolded. It has taken up so much energy and time, understandably. It's terrible for the Ukrainian population in particular, but we also have to remember that IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel Report, on the 28th of February, the last day of February, it told us that we are in a very serious position for the whole world and we don't have a safe future yet. And we have to work at that. And we focused then on that on Earth Day, which I very much welcome.
Absolutely. And of course, the Working Group 3 also came out with a report recently, which people can research and learn more about too. I kind of wanted to go back to our experiences at COP, and it was a very emotional experience, and you've obviously done countless COPs, but there are a lot of mixed feelings around the outcomes of COP26 back in Glasgow. What do you feel were your biggest disappointments, I suppose, from the talks?
Well, let's start with some positives, because there were some positives. Countries did make commitments before Glasgow, and business was very engaged at a certain level, as was investment. There were important agreements on methane, which hadn't been dealt with before, which is actually more lethal than carbon in the short term. So it was important to get a handle on that and address that. There were agreements on no deforestation, which, if implemented, would also be helpful. And you might hear me saying all the time, if implemented, because that's the disappointment. We saw pledges and promises. And then there was a moment, and I was live on Sky television because I was doing analysis for them, when Climate Action Tracker came out with a calculation that if you add up all the pledges and everybody did implement, we were still on course for a world of 2.4 degrees Celsius, which of warming above pre-industrial standards. That would be catastrophic. And it kind of caught me. And I realized that anybody under 70 would encounter some of this catastrophic world in their lifetime. Anybody under 30 would see a lot of it over a long period and would have to endure unbelievable mass migration, unlivable conditions, etc. We shouldn't have to face that. And we have to begin to get very real about what needs to be done, and that it's not words that matter, it's not pledges that matter, it's implementation.
Yeah. There was a very, very important issue around coal as well, right? There was, so coal is actually one of the largest energy polluters that we are still using, and actually accounts for around 45% of our energy related carbon emissions. And at the very, very last minute, there were changes to the final negotiations. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, there had been a real move to phase out coal, and that was weakened at the last, towards the end, with particular energy by India. But India somehow got caught in the front line of that. There were others. There was Saudi Arabia. There were many others. There was Russia, etc., who were all making that point. And the important thing is the International Energy Agency, which has been a conservative body of the fossil fuel industry, is now saying categorically, we have to get out of fossil fuel as fast as possible, and we have to get out of coal now, not tomorrow, now. That is very impressive. Fatih Birol, the Director General of it, is clearly understanding that we cannot have coal into our future, and yet China's building more coal, other countries are building it. There is a more of a willingness not to invest in coal outside the country, external coal production, which is important, but actually it's not nearly enough.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of things that did go right for this year's negotiations, I mean, fossil fuels were actually named and shamed for the first time, weren't they? 'Cause before they've been named as just greenhouse gas emissions, but where are they coming from? There is actually named and shamed. But also this move to shift NDC reporting, moving it from once every 5 years to once every year as well. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was a particularly important step, and it came with an awareness that everybody is now aligning with staying at or below 1.5 degrees. Scientists say to us, we may have to go above in the short term, then extract carbon from the air and come down to 1.5. But 1.5 is the outer limit of what is really livable. Between 1.5 degrees and 2 degrees, very bad things happen. The coral reefs will probably disappear. The Arctic ice will probably be lost. And permafrost around the Arctic, and the huge amount of permafrost, would melt and throw up not just carbon, but methane. So that alignment with 1.5 was really important. And that was together with that sense of countries realizing that we can't wait 3 or 5 years. So there was an agreement that the major emitters will come back next year and must increase their ambition, or should increase their ambition. It's hard to have a must at the international level. It's all about peer pressure and public pressure and people. And it was great to see young people being so vocal, so determined at COP. And, my heart went out to many young friends, because they've become good friends now, like, Vanessa Nakate of Uganda, or Shia Bastida. They're just wonderful young leaders, and they're so frustrated. And I mean, you remember that Greta Thunberg came out with the blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. I actually think, it's good not to totally dismiss what happened in Glasgow, because there were positives. We've mentioned some of them, but it was not nearly enough.
No, agree. And, what I felt from being there was that there was more conversation around that 0.5 degree difference as well, and the acknowledgement that 0.5 degree difference is specifically in regards to climate justice. And so there were more, the term loss and damage was something. Speak a little bit to that as well.
Yes, I think it's really important that we understand the necessity for loss and damage. Actually, the recent Intergovernmental Panel report, the IPCC report of the 28th of February, dealt with adaptation and showed the severe damage that's been done, and it mentioned loss and damage. It didn't mention it in the political sense of a COP. It mentioned losses and damages, because it was too political to mention loss and damage, but we all know what they meant. And there was an attempt by a number of developing countries in the G77 to have a Glasgow institution for loss and damage. And that was in the end prevented. And instead, there was talk of dialogues. Now, the dialogue going up to COP27 must be all about what kind of institution are we going to have? What kind of fund are we going to have for loss and damage? No more talking around the subject, but just getting to the heart of it. Because one thing that happened that was very good and that I welcomed very much was a commitment in Glasgow at COP26 to double climate adaptation finance, climate finance for adaptation, double it by 2025. But sadly, Thimali, there's still no pathway for that. There's still no game plan as to how we get there. It's another of these promises like the 100 billion that we're having such trouble getting to. And I'm very afraid that if we don't see some movement, particularly on this one, on adaptation, climate finance, because that's so important for developing countries, when we get to COP27, there'll be a kind of, sense of, no trust left, a real trust deficit in the negotiations. There was a touch of that in Glasgow, and we just about managed to get through without it becoming a real issue. It mustn't become an issue in Egypt. It really mustn't. So we do need much more implementation of commitments made.
Yeah, I mean, I saw you hanging out with the folks at the Climate Vulnerable Forum and the Climate Emergency Pact as being a really fantastic initiative as well. But I do sort of feel like this commitment to climate justice and actually really being talked about as an important critical issue is sort of proof of the sort of collective work that the climate justice community have done is so incredibly impressive. And I have to say that's where I found a lot of my hope and my inspiration came from the People's Summit for Climate Justice, which was described as sort of a parallel COP happening in the peripheries around Glasgow, where a lot of those conversations were happening with migrant workers and feminist groups and frontline communities and racial justice groups from all over the world, really sort of really defining the concept.
And I think there is a real, I agree with you. And I think there is a real movement now to link some of the movements that are relevant, like Black Lives Matter, the Me Too movement, and broader movements, because now that the Northern Hemisphere is also being hit very hard with climate shocks by the week. I mean, look at the flooding at the moment in Sydney, and a year ago they had these terrible forest fires. California's had them, Germany's had unbelievable flooding, and so on. These are the ways in which we're perceiving the shocks that are coming. But if we go above that 1.5 limit, we know that we will reach tipping points, and nature will no longer be our friend, absorbing so much carbon, but actually could turn into our enemy and begin throwing up from, for example, the Amazon. The Amazon could turn from being the wonderful carbon sink, and there's a real threat to it. So, getting back to the fact that, we've had an understandable shift in oil and gas. For example, President Biden some time ago stopped oil, gas and coal imports from Russia. The United Kingdom is doing the same thing at the end of the year. The EU ministers have met to see what the EU can do, which is much more dependent. This is the moment to really get serious about clean energy. It really is. And I'm sorry not to see it more pronounced. It's there, but it's not there enough. And I'm really pleading with young people, and use all your strength of organizing, your strength of campaigning to say, we have to get out of fossil fuel. We have to get out of subsidizing fossil fuel, subsidizing what is harming us. We have to get out of universities allowing fossil fuel companies to support research in the universities. All of that has to stop in order that we will be able to come to COP27 and feel we've shifted enough. We are now in transition, and it has to be a just transition.
Here, my goodness. So then what needs to happen in the year ahead, coming up to COP27 in Egypt? What do you think are the key bullet points that need to be dealt with?
I think we need to take each of the commitments made at COP26 and track where we are on them, and begin to put real pressure on the major emitters that have not made commitments. And I would start with Australia, because Australia is a developed, rich country. and it's having terrible impacts of climate on its people. And there are a lot of people in Australia who want the government to change, but they haven't done so. And I would go on to Saudi Arabia, I'd go on to looking more from China, looking more from India. But what about the United States? The United States made a commitment, President Biden made a commitment in the UN General Assembly a year ago to double the climate finance, meaning bringing it up to 11.4 billion, which is still below what the United States should do. But my understanding is they're finding it hard to find it because of their problems in Congress. We have to shake off this kind of mentality that, you know, that climate is a partisan something. You know, I know President Biden is trying, but it is, you know, again, unless the United States also implements the talk. John Kerry and his Chinese colleague have said they'll work together. That's very good, but we have to see implementation.
Absolutely. One very, very last quick question. What can regular people watching do to participate in what's going on? It's very easy to feel helpless, or that if you're not in the room negotiating, there's nothing you can do.
I think we've learned that people have more power than we thought we had. You know, look at COVID. Collective human behavior was the only thing that protected us before the vaccine. The collective social distancing, washing hands, wearing masks. We weren't ever doing that. And then all over the world, we started to do it. We need to find collective ways, individual building into collective ways to make the climate crisis personal, and then take steps like reducing our reducing our consumption in the richer parts of the world, and being more efficient about energy, changing our eating habits, slow cooking, slow fashion, all of that. Then the second step is to get angry with those who aren't doing enough. And that's governments, of course, the big emitters, the fossil fuel companies, business in a broader sense that isn't committed to net zero investment, but also towns and cities. Cities are very key, and some of them are doing very good work. So get angry with those who aren't doing enough. And then the most important step, as I keep saying, is we have to imagine this world. We have to be in a different place in less than 8 years' time, because we'll be in 2030. And we know by 2030, we have to have reduced carbon emissions by 45%. 45%. They're going up at the moment. Come on, get real world. And what we want to see is a much healthier world without the pollution of fossil fuel, the indoor and outdoor pollution, a greening of cities, farms and gardens in cities, a greening and regeneration in the countryside, a re-wetting of the, you know, all the ways of storing carbon. We need to get excited about it. We need to, you know, stop kind of campaigning on a negative side to stop doing things and campaign on a positive side. This is the world we want. And I think that will motivate us more.
I know, absolutely, absolutely. And I have to say, and I speak from experience here, that when you feel really, really sad about what's going on outside, and there's a lot to be sad about, that coming together as a community, getting together with people, with your neighbors, and participating in community organizing can really change so much, not just because you're actually doing things, you're actually implementing, but you're also within a community of like-minded people who also feel passionately about making change. So that is how we can create new visions within local all the way through to global global landscape.
And you're very right. You've always been concerned. I noticed that when we were doing our Mothers of Invention, with self-care, with how do you feel yourself? How is your mental health? And that's really important at the moment. And it is helped by activity and participating and feeling that you own the crisis yourself of climate change, and you're going to do something about it, and then insist that others play their part. I think it's a very healthy way of moving forward now.
We're interdependent people, aren't we, Mary?
We are.
So I will leave it there. I could do this with you all day, but I'm so grateful for your leadership, Mary, as we all are. So thank you for having this chat. Thank you, Earth Day Initiative, for having us, and come join us on Mothers of Invention really soon. Take care. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, Thimali. That was fun. It was great to be with you.